Hi, my name's Shane Edmiston. Welcome to The Shed. I'm a freelance illustrator and book cover designer and graphic designer. So this video is just about how I get idea development. It's not about a final design, but it's just hopefully going to show you my workflow and the sort of processes I use in order to get to a couple of concepts that I can then share with the author. So this video is aimed at illustrators and cover designers, and you're thinking about using Procreate or a similar app on your iPad or whatever you might do, or even if you're just sketching really on paper and pencil, but just to get that initial early concept down, a couple of concepts preferably, which we can then take on to the next phase and hone in on one with feedback from the author. I'll be covering things like research, a lot of research in the early stages definitely. I'm using ChatGPT and Midjourney to generate ideas and to get palettes and stuff, get a colour palette going. I never use any AI images obviously in the final piece, but it is a great tool for getting those initial concepts going if we're looking at colour palettes and stuff like that. So yeah, super helpful. It's a tool, it's there, we might as well use it. So the very first thing that happens before anything else is that a questionnaire will be sent out to the author, and it will have roughly about 25 questions about what exactly they want on the cover itself. If there's a tagline, see what the genre is first and foremost. Is it fantasy? Is it a thriller? Is it a historical thriller? If it's fantasy, there's so many subgenres within fantasy. I'm working on one at the moment actually for an author, and it's young adult epic coming of age fantasy. So it's not going to be like sort of grim dark, you know, it's going to be quite kind of colourful in tone and stuff and in the palette, but we can get into that a little bit later. But that initial questionnaire is super important because that is going to give you your framework. It's going to answer all those questions, you know, that you might have for the author, and it avoids a lot of back and forth as well. It's really important to, I think, to have a questionnaire up front, and it's something I can always reference back to whenever I need to, basically. So a questionnaire is the starting point, but also within that questionnaire I'll ask for a brief synopsis of the book. So a synopsis of the book from the author will pretty much give you everything you need to know, or it should do. You know, it should give you everything you need to know to really get going with that initial concept. So the goal of that is to really get a feel for the story. Are there any main characters that the author wants on the front, if any at all? If we're talking about fantasy, let's say, as a particularly sort of YA fantasy, usually, you know, not always, you see a lot of symbolism these days with book covers. There's some beautiful covers out there that might just use a sword or an element from the story. You know, you've probably seen them, you might have a crown and there's a snake around it or something like that. But there's still a strong case to be had for a single character on the front, usually kind of with their back to you, not always, you know, but just as a general concept. And that's a good place to start. So yeah, so the questionnaire and the synopsis will give you some of those details. And in terms of the character, if you are coming up with a character, it doesn't have to be spot on. You know, the author might have obviously a very strong idea in mind of their character. They've written the characters, right? They're going to know them better than anyone. But for your character on the front, it doesn't really have to have every single detail. You know, sometimes less is more. I was told this at uni actually when I was doing illustration. I remember doing my, going off on a bit of a tangent here, but bear with me. I remember when I was doing my final major project and I was working on an animation, a short animation. It was like for the Jabberwocky by Lewis Carroll's poem, The Jabberwocky, which I'd always loved since I was a kid. But I was putting in every single detail on the characters, and I can remember a couple of my tutors saying, you know, less information, less is better, you know, just strip it back. And that's what I ended up doing, and it was all the better for it. But anyway, I digress. Point being, your character doesn't really need to have all the details, and especially at this stage, right? We're just aiming for a concept. We're not looking for a finished piece. There'll be no finished pieces in this video. We're just aiming for a concept and a rough, just to get a feel for the tone of the book and whether the author's gonna be on board with what we're doing. But it's all about research. This is so important at this early phase. I would say spend time up front researching the genre and subgenre. We're looking at key imagery, symbols, you know, any symbolism that needs to be in there. We're looking at the overall vibe. Is it romantic? Is it romantasy if it is fantasy, or is it just, you know, a romance novel that you're doing a cover for? So is it gritty? Is it dark? Is it gothic? Is it funny? All of that needs to be understood at this stage. And a really nice to have on the questionnaire for the author is, are there any comparable titles, book titles or covers that they really like or dislike? If you can get that information from them early on, then you can know what to avoid. You know, we're obviously still going to bring our expertise to the table. they're looking at us to guide them, you know, in terms of the book. So it's finding that balance, right? You want your author client to be happy with the result, of course you do. At the same time, we're the experts in our field, and we're the ones doing the research, and we've got our finger on the pulse of what's working out there, you know, what's on the shelves, what's selling in terms of the actual cover itself. You know, let the author, they write the book, they know what they're doing, but we're there to guide them and design the appropriate cover, the right cover for them. This is all about commercial success. We're trying to make that book stand out but blend in at the same time. It needs to look like it fits in with whichever genre category. It needs to be hitting all the tropes within their genre, but at the same time it needs to pop, and we want it to stand out. We want it to have some sort of emotional resonance, you know, something that's going to really grab a would-be reader. Obviously we're talking Amazon as well here, you know, KDP, we're looking at thumbnail size, so whatever we do, it needs to really pop a very small size. So that's really important to bear in mind as well, all the way through the process. So it's really important to know the genre expectations within whichever genre, you know, you're designing a cover for. And my starting point these days is ChatGPT, without a doubt. It's been so helpful for me to use ChatGPT to really get a deep dive, and we'll literally have a conversation. I will go back and forth on this for a while, really trying to figure out, okay, who are the best selling authors in their genre, right? Who's knocking it out of the park right now in terms of actually shifting those copies, you know, and you can easily do that on Amazon. Jump into Amazon, type in the genre that you're after, or the author names that that ChatGPT's given you, and then jump in there, start checking out their covers, and I start saving them to a folder, a reference folder. I just start grabbing screen grabs of those covers, putting them in a folder, and I've always got them in to just keep coming back to. So we want to be super organized from the off. And you can use ChatGPT just to say to it, you know, what are the common tropes for this genre? And then we can really start to get a feel for the imagery that's being used, you know, on those covers. And you'll start to probably see a theme emerging. All of this is going to help you know what to follow, what to use, and what to just bin off. So once we're in ChatGPT and we're starting to find out who the authors are, you know, who's really killing it in that genre, we can ask ChatGPT to write us mid-journey prompts to come up with ideas and concepts in itself. Now, like I said before, I've never used any AI generated imagery in any final piece or even in a concept. I'm obviously not nicking those and putting them straight into my concepts or anything like that. So you can literally say to ChatGPT, write me a mid-journey prompt that's gonna design me a cover for, you know, for this genre, let's say it's fantasy, and be as specific as you want with ChatGPT. Drill down into it, you know, mood, color palette, setting, style. Just get right into it. Remember, this is just mood reference. We're not going to use these images that Midjourney pumps out in seconds for anything in the final product or anything like that. We're literally using it like a mood board, if you like. It's just a great way of establishing a tone fairly quickly, and it's never going to get it right first time or all the time. Obviously you get 4 images, and then you can start to zero in a little bit on one if you like one, make it stronger, twist it this way, whatever. But yeah, I flick between ChatGPT and Midjourney and just ask Chat to give me those prompts for Midjourney to spit out, and save these concepts, save these Midjourney ones that it's giving you. If you like a few of them, start to put them in a separate folder as well, and I'll clearly label that folder AI reference, because Chat will also give me some images as well. It's been quite helpful lately in that, where you're having these conversations with ChatGPT, which is fucking weird to be doing it, but anyway, that's where we're going with AI. You can get into these amazing conversations with it, and you can ask it to produce its own imagery. So yeah, having those as reference is a great starting point. But let's not forget about good old Pinterest, right? Mood boards, Pinterest, amazing. When you start saving to a board in Pinterest, it's going to start recommending other ones. You'll see other similar covers popping up. Anything that's grabbing your attention, anything you like the look of, and they might vary wildly, right? You might be in the same genre, fantasy. One cover's pretty cold and dark looking maybe, and the other one's teals and golds. So, you know, but just anything you like the look of, start putting them in a folder, and you're going to use that to jump back to later on. But what I would say is don't overdo it if you can. It can get a bit, you know, you could spend obviously hours doing this, and I am all for research, 100%. Spend a chunk of time up front, I think, within reason, doing this research and figuring out, you know, the tone, like I say, of this book. You could get quite overwhelmed at this point. I mean, sometimes I walk into Waterstones you know, you see all these beautiful covers. It can feel a little bit overwhelming, even that in itself, let alone when you're trying to make decisions, right? Well, there's an art to book cover design, and there's also a science to it as well, really, where we're trying to hit these genre expectations. Like if you've got too many options, let's just tread lightly, take what we like and discard the rest. So yeah, keep it tight and keep it focused at this point. Have fun with it and really, you know, get into it, and you'll go down some rabbit holes with it. I know I've spent time looking at one cover, especially on Pinterest, one cover leads to another, you know, fucking that's beautiful, and then before you know it, sort of half an hour's gone, and you know, but as long as you're going in the right direction and you're sticking to the path, so to speak, and you're keeping it tight, you're keeping it focused on what the mission is, if you like, what the project brief is. And I'll always keep flicking back to that questionnaire and that synopsis and any notes that the author's given me, and I'll have that to hand all the time, so I can just keep checking back on it. So now we get into the creative stuff, right? Procreate, yeah, we start sketching out thumbnails. We just start coming up with super loose, rough ideas about what it is we're going to do. You know, if it's a character on the front, we've got a landscape and we've got a dragon in the sky or something like that, we're just going to come up with shapes, very, very loose. But also with Procreate at this stage, I like to put some typography in. Now, it might not be, or it probably won't be, you know, 99% it's not going to be the finished type. It's not going to be the sort of the chosen font necessarily, but with Procreate, you can use typography. It's a clunky process right now. I'm hoping with OS 26 around the corner, it might get a bit smoother. Because type is obviously such an important part of a cover design, you know, it wouldn't be a cover without a title, would it? And an author name. So super important. And in terms of layout and positioning, we need to make sure in the early stage, where's that title going? And it can move around, don't get me wrong. It could be, because you could have a series title, maybe at the top, you have the book title, you might have a tagline, and then maybe you've got the author and you'll have the author name. Where we position those will vary, you know, depending. But I would say at the concept stage to get at least some those in there, even if we're just blocking it out. And so don't worry too much about the font you're using at this point. That's going to change probably later on down the line. But it really helps with our positioning, because we don't want to be whacking a title right in the middle and that's where our character is, you know. So we need to figure those things out early on, and this is where the thumbnails and the sketching and yeah, just dropping in some quick type can really help. And don't spend too long on this, just get those thumbnails down. We're just moving things around, silhouetted shapes, light and shadow, where's the light coming in from, you know, have we got any rim light in there, ambient light, and focal points as well. So usually sort of 2 or 3 roughs, don't have to go crazy with it. Just use simple brushes for speed in Procreate. I've said this before, but I generally just use one brush. I have done for years. It's the Soft Rull, I think you pronounce it, Soft R-U-L-L, by Nikolai Lakurtson. And I love that brush. It just suits what I do. I use it for sketching, for painting. So yeah, pick your brush, your weapon of choice, one you love, and don't worry about it too much, you know what I mean? At this point, just like I say, get those thumbnails down, start sketching, but do keep your layers organized. I'm not really one of these illustrators that will use tons and tons of layers. It can get a little bit complicated later on down the line with Procreate and Affinity, but we won't talk about Affinity in this because that's when we take it to the next level, we start to really polish. But even in Procreate, yeah, the layers can get a bit crazy. So I like to keep organized. I like to label every layer, sketch layer, whether it's tone, value, color, whatever it is, I'll give it a little title and I'll start to group layers as well. Super simple to do, and it just keeps things organized from the off. So once I've got a couple of roughs down, we're gonna maybe kick it up a gear, and in Procreate, I'll maybe open up an A3 landscape document, knowing full well that the book cover is not gonna be. So the 2 main sizes, and I'll get into this in another video when we really get into the weeds a little bit with cover design. The 2 main sizes that I use, you've got 5x8 inch and 6x9 inch. They tend to be the two main sizes from the KDP cover calculator when you download a template. And actually at this point, I'll even think about doing that. I've done it many times. And so I'll go to KDP cover calculator where you can download the templates. Now that will be one of the questions in the questionnaire to the author. What size book do they want? They might not know. That's not a problem at all. Generally speaking, if we're doing fantasy, they tend to be big books, right? Big chunky books, because all the time, even though we're designing an ebook cover here, primarily, right, because ebooks sell more than paperbacks do on Amazon, etc. And not just Amazon, you know, the author might want to go wide as well. But for the purposes of this video, when I talk about KDP and Amazon, right? So yeah, we could go an ebook, and we're thinking about ebook all the time. We're thinking about that thumbnail that the potential reader's gonna see. But it wouldn't hurt at this stage, and I'll do this quite a bit, to go to KDP, download, let's say a 6x9 inches template, and then I can drop that straight into Procreate. And then I've got my canvas then, and it doesn't matter. And the reason I kind of would like that at this point is because we've got the front cover and the spine and the back cover. So we're in Procreate still, and we've got a few thumbnails, and I'll start to work one of them up. We're going to give our client 2 options if we can, 3 at a push. But the thing is, right, we don't want to give them too much. We don't want to overwhelm them with choice, and we want to give them an idea that we think is strong, obviously. Now, we don't want to give them any ideas, any concepts that we're not happy with personally, right? And there's going to be weak ones, there's going to be stronger ones in this exploration phase as we're doing this. What we don't really want to do is hand them, let's say, 2 concepts. One we love, the other one we really don't. We're not happy with it, but we've put the work in, and we're thinking, let's share this with them anyway, just to show them that we've been busy. Right? If they're not in a rush for it, not a problem. We've got to know our deadline. We know what we're aiming for. We're never going to miss a deadline and keep them waiting or anything like that. And maybe there's a bit of us that feels like, okay, we need to show them everything we've done, just to sort of justify, you know, the time and their money that's being spent on this, right? But I would advise, let's not do that, okay? So that if we've got 2 concepts that we want to be happy with, both those concepts. They might be quite different. They're going to be concepts that sit within their genre, and we've already established that. We're not going to do anything silly and go too far out on a limb here or anything like that. We're going to make sure that we're hitting the mark. But we want to be happy, because if they choose the one, you know, what you don't want to do is give them a strong one and one you're a bit, yeah, not really keen on that, but I'll show it to you anyway. They go and pick that one, and then you're kind of in the shit a bit, right? Because you think, oh, you know, I didn't want them to choose that one. Now I've got to work on it, etc. But they're paying us for our guidance and expertise, so we need to be steering it the direction. But at the same time, we need to give them a bit of choice. So it's finding that sweet spot and making sure they're happy and that we're happy as well before we move on. And so from those initial thumbnails that we've started off with, I will develop them up to colour. When we do present them, usually what I'll do, it'll just be an email to the client, and it'll be a PDF in there with the 2 ideas on. And we're going to explain in that email to the client why we think this concept works. And that's a good opportunity as well for us to talk about how we have explored other routes, other ideas, without having to show them the weaker ideas we're not keen on. So the email to the client, the first email back to them, with the concepts attached, we want to talk about why this cover concept is really, really working, why it's hitting the tropes. And it might be that initially they didn't have that in mind. Like when we go back to the questionnaire, and one of the questions will be, what do you envisage on the cover? They might have envisaged something completely different, and we might have explored that already. It's very likely that we have. So in that email, we've got to justify why we're doing what we're doing, because we want to knock this cover out of the park for them and make sure it's going to get eyes on their book and help sell their book. We're not doing it for our own portfolio. Of course, it could end up in our portfolio happily. You know, if we're proud of it, brilliant. But again, it's all about selling their book, right? And in that email, if we can talk about that, why we think this has got market potential, etc., and commercial potential, then we can hopefully win them over at that stage. Even, like I say, even if they're thinking, Christ, this isn't what I envisaged at all, right? This isn't what I pictured in my mind at all. As long as you can back it up with why we think this is the way we should go, then good stuff. So yeah, we want to include those notes as to why it works, why it communicates well, why it's hitting those tropes. And we're going to ask for feedback before we move on. And I always say to the author, you know, don't hold back, right? Like, give me the good, the bad and the ugly. It's fine, I can take it, right? I've got thick skin, been doing this long enough. Because we want that feedback from them, you know? We really want to encourage them to comment on all of it and what they like and what they don't like. Because this is going to be gold for moving it forward the next stage. So just to recap, analyse the brief, look at the questionnaire, don't miss anything at that stage. Research, lots of it, mood boards, Pinterest, etc., sketches, and then we're going to work those sketches up into rough ideas, but they've got colour in them, they've got an atmosphere to them, they're going to convey an emotion, hopefully, even though there's no finesse or polish there. The thing to bear in mind though is that quite often, people don't know, if they're not particularly visual as well, they're not designers, remember, they're not illustrators. You've probably heard this before, but people say, I'll know it when I see it. So we have to sort of tread that line between showing them something. We don't want to spend weeks polishing this thing up. We could have just wasted our time, their time, if we're going down a road that they're just not happy with at all. So let's always bear that in mind at this stage. We only want to get it to a certain point, but it still has to convey that tone, that we're looking for. And reinforce to the author at this point, this is pre-design work, this is just a concept at this stage. It's going to be rough and ready, even though we want to give them a good glimpse at what it could look like. It's important to just reinforce that, this is just a concept. Don't panic, right? Don't worry about it. This isn't their final cover. So yeah, just want to mention, I'm going to be doing an upcoming video soon with iPad OS 26 dropping quite soon. I'm keeping a close eye on things because I can't wait to get going with it on the iPad and seeing what Affinity Photo is going to look like. Not so much look like, but how it's going to function with, hopefully with the file, the sort of new menu and stuff like that. So I'm holding off doing a video right now until I've got that and I've played around with it on the iPad Affinity Photo. But yeah, I'll be dropping that video as soon as I can, and it will be a walkthrough using Affinity Photo for the next level now, from the next stage, from the concept stage, to really like zeroing in on the chosen design and the chosen concept and working it up in Affinity Photo on the iPad. So look out for that video. If you like this one, hit the thumbs up, like and subscribe if you can, and it'll help me out a lot. And drop a comment if you've got any questions. Everything I've been chatting about here, this is my way of doing things. You might have a completely different way of doing it, and I'd love to hear that. And there's also a link to Calendly if you want to book a 30-minute free discovery call with me. If you want to get a bit more in-depth with stuff, we can have a one-to-one and just have a good chat about cover design. Until the next Shed episode, take care, I'll see you soon.